he had a wonderful word from God about the fact that when you're sick, it doesn't mean that you're lacking in faith or that you had some sin in your life. The sickness came because of sin in the world, and that does not mean that if you're sick that you lack faith for God to heal you, or that if you're sick that you've created some sin in your life. And he showed some wonderful examples backing that up from the scripture. So I encourage you to come Saturday night at 7 o'clock for that service. We'll also be praying. He will be praying, and I will be praying with an agreement, but praying for those who need healing. So if you want to come to that service, we would appreciate that. Thank you, Jim, for doing that for us, Pastor Jim. Exodus chapter 20. Some of you might be going, what's in Exodus chapter 20? Well, other ones might be saying, this is the same scripture that I figure they'd always preach on Mother's Day, right? We're looking in verse 12 of Exodus chapter 20. And this is a verse that I have learned more and more the longer I live. It's become more real to me. It's out of the 10 Commandments. And the first 5 commandments all deal with God and how we deal with God. The first 4, excuse me. And this one is the first one that deals with how we deal with one another. Now he goes on, and the rest of them deal with how we deal with one another. But I truly believe that this one is in this order because of all the commandments of how we deal with other people. This one influences our lives probably more than any of the others. Exodus chapter 20, verse 12 says, "Honor your father and your mother, so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you." Honor your mother and father. Reminds me of a story of a boy. Sunday morning, his mom comes in and says, "Get up, it's time to go to church." And he says, "I don't want to go to church." She says, "Get up, you're going to church. You have to go to church. Get up, you're going to church." "I don't want to go to church." "You have to go to church." And he says, "Well, why do I have to go to church?" "Well, first off, you're 33 years old. Second off, you're the pastor, so get up." Our moms are the ones who help us know what is right from wrong. They're the ones that help teach us what we should do and what we should not do. And we're very blessed to have them. And Exodus says, honor your father and mother. Now, I had to learn the hard way. I've never met my father, and he's never been in my life. So I thought, he's not honorable, so I don't have to honor him. You know, I hate when God says, but. You know, you ever been there? When you think you got it figured out, I'm like, okay, I'll honor my mom. She's been there for me. She's loved me. She put up with me. But I'm not going to honor my father because he's not honorable. But did you ever see in the scripture, does it say, if your parents are honorable, honor them? It doesn't say anything about what your parents are honorable or dishonorable. It doesn't say how they treat you. It just says that we are to honor our mother and father. Now, I don't have any contact with my father, but I had to learn to honor him in my thoughts and how I thought about, how I prayed for, how I talked about. Because I had to realize that we are all human, we all make errors, and we all need forgiveness. So when it says honor, it talks the idea of giving esteem to, listening to, heeding advice, lifting one up as in a place that they deserve to be placed, honoring our mother and our father. Like I said, the longer I'm a parent, the more I truly respect my mom for all that she did. And we had 40 kids here for our last Wednesday night. Last Wednesday was our last G&K for the summer break. It was so fun. We had just a ton of fun. We invited parents, and several parents came, and we had a cookout, hot dogs and hamburgers, and we played games. And as one of the kids were leaving, I'm not going to tell on them, Their parent was here and said, "Come on, we're going," and they started to walk the opposite direction because they still wanted to play. And I just stopped them, and I looked them, I kind of got down on their level and looked them in the eye, and I said, "You know, honoring your mother is one of the most important things you will ever learn to do. And you're making a choice right now and how the rest of your life is going to go. And I really encourage you to turn back around and walk the other way and honor your mother." Of course, the child being fairly young yet, not a teenager or anything, so they were very kind and listened to my words and turned around and walked back with their mother. But why would I say that it's a choice that really affects the rest of your life? Because really, learning to honor your parents is what provides you the foundation of learning to honor all authority in your life from the very beginning to the very end. You will find that people who do not honor their parents do not honor their teachers. People who do not honor their parents do not honor police officers. People who do not honor their parents usually will not honor and submit themselves to God's rule. Because the authority set in your life at a very young age is your parent, and if you learn to rebel against that authority at a very young age, you will tend to learn to rebel against all authority in your life step by step. And I will tell you from experience, bucking authority for your life is not a pleasant way to live. It just brings heartache and pain on yourself. Bucking authority in your life only brings hurt for you. I learned those lessons. I learned those run-ins with the police. I learned those lessons of them showing up at my house when I was younger. I learned that when I bucked authority, when I fought against the authority placed above me, it only brought hurt and pain on me. I doubt those police officers remember me one little bit, but I remember them. I didn't cause them as much pain as they caused me. And really, our mother and our father are that first authority figure in our life. When we were in Bible college, of course, you can't put 1,000 young people in the same Bible college and expect weddings and relationships not to happen. So my Central Bible College was also called Central Bridal College because I was in more weddings in that 4-year span in Bible college than I have been in my whole life other than pastoring, officiating. But I think I should have just bought a tux at the beginning of Bible college and just called it good because I had to rent so many of them. But one thing that I heard from the older students on campus is, when you start to look at a girl to date her, find out if she gets along with her parents. If she doesn't get along with her parents, don't even bother dating her. And I was like, wow, that seems pretty harsh. And then I'm thinking, there's times I haven't gotten along with my parent very good, so maybe they won't date me. Well, they didn't. I was single after 4 years of Bible college, so God had to teach me to honor and respect my mom before I was ready to be in a relationship outside of that relationship. Because I really do believe that is a foundational relationship, and it affects that relationship, and how you deal with your parents affects your relationship and how you deal with a spouse. And here's an earth-shaking idea. How you deal with your parents is how your children are going to deal with you. Everybody said, ouch. Now listen, your children are learning how to honor their parents by watching how you honor your parents. If your parents are still alive, your children are watching. And so when you complain about your parents with your children there, guess what they're going to learn to do about you? When you do not go and visit your parents and care for them, guess what's going to happen when your children, when you get that age? The family relationship is so important. God speaks so much on it in His Word. He holds great love for the family relationship. In fact, it's so important to Him, He chose to reveal Himself within a family relationship. Because we think of God as our Father. You think that's an accident? You think anything God does is an accident? The family relationship is so important that God decided to reveal Himself to us by calling Himself our Father. All authority flows from God and flows down. And we must learn to live in God's authority. Turn with me, if you would, to 1 Samuel chapter 1. I want to talk, I've been talking about parents in general, but I want to talk specifically about a parent. 1 Samuel chapter 1. Because I want to talk about a good mom. I want to talk about Hannah. 1 Samuel chapter 1. Starting off in verse 9, speaking of Hannah. Once, when they had finished eating and drinking in Shiloh, Hannah stood up. Now Eli the priest was sitting on a chair by the doorpost of the Lord's temple. In bitterness of soul, Hannah wept much and prayed to the Lord. And she made a vow, saying, O Lord Almighty, if you will only look upon your servant's misery and remember me, and not forget your servant, but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life, and no razor will ever be used on his head. And as she kept on praying to the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was praying in her heart, and her lips were moving, but her voice was not heard. Eli thought she was drunk, and he said to her, How long will you keep on getting drunk? Get rid of your wine. Not so, my lord, Hannah replied. I am a woman who is deeply troubled. I have not been drinking wine or beer. I was pouring out my soul to the Lord. I was pouring out my soul to the Lord. Hannah was an example of a wonderful woman of God, a wonderful mother, because she prayed and sought God for her family. She prayed. This must have been a prayer that was very intense, a prayer that was very heartfelt. I mean, if you look at the words that describe her prayer about she wept and bitterness and the heart that she put into it, she was praying with everything she had for her family to be. We need to pray for our families. Not only for the family we already have, but the family of the next generation that's yet to come. I remember before Abby was born, before I even got married, I had a song that I really liked by Wayne Watson, a Christian singer. Somewhere in the world today. And the song said, somewhere in the world today, a little boy is learning how to pray. No, a little girl is learning how to pray. All dressed up in mama's clothes and doing the things that she's supposed to do. And he says, and I'm praying for that little girl. And the next talks about her parents and how they're showing her the way and how he's praying for that little girl. And he says at the end of the song, I'm praying for her just the same because someday my little boy is going to need a godly wife. So here he has an infant son and he writes a song of prayer for his son's wife 20, 30 years down the road. We don't just pray for our children. We don't just leave a spiritual legacy to our children. We leave a spiritual legacy to our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren and our great-great-grandchildren. God desires to bless our families from generation to generation. But we have to be like Hannah. We have to pray. We have to be parents who say, I want to pray for my children. I want to pray for them for all I'm worth. Next, we see 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 24, The Lord blesses Hannah, and she was praying because she could not become pregnant. She could not have a male son. And this was big in her culture for several reasons. First off, it was your male son who took care of you in your old age. If you had no male heir, you didn't have anybody to look after you. But also, it was your male son that received the inheritance and your male son that carried your name on. And she was praying for God to give her an heir, give her a child. And God listens to this heartfelt prayer, and God gives her a son. But see, when she was in a tough place, she made a commitment to God. She made a commitment to God when she was between the rock and the hard place, and she said, God, if you do give me a child, I will give him back to you. Now, how many times in our life have we made a commitment to God? In a stressful time, we make a commitment to God, and later on, we just don't want to keep that commitment because it just seems too hard. There's been times in my life where God's answered a prayer, and I said, God, if you answer this prayer, I will. And then the hard time's over, the prayer's been answered, it's all past, and now I'm left with my words of commitment to God. Hannah was a mother who kept her commitments to God. The hardest commitment that she could keep, she kept the commitment to God to give her child back to the Lord who gave it to her. In verse 24, after he was weaned, she took the boy with her, young as he was, along with a 3-year-old bull, an ephah of flour, and a skin of wine, and brought them to the house of the Lord at Shiloh. And when they had slaughtered the bull, they brought the boy to Eli. And she said to him, as surely as you live, my Lord, I am the woman who stood there beside you praying to the Lord. And I prayed for this child, and the Lord has granted me what I have asked of him. So now I give him to the Lord. For his whole life he will be given over to the Lord, and he will worship the Lord there. She's given up her son. She's given him back to the Lord. As the Lord had given it to her, given the son to her, he is now being given back to the Lord. Now, this is not just giving up her son. This is also giving up the person who was to take care of her in her old age. This is the giving up the person who was to be her heir and the one to carry on her family's name. Because now, with him given to the house of the Lord, he will never marry or have children. She takes a very harsh vow, a very hard vow to carry out, but she's faithful. And she says, Lord, I've made this commitment to you, and I'm going to carry it through. Sometimes we think we've made a commitment to God that seems so hard, but I guarantee you, you have not made a commitment so hard as to give your only child up as God did with Jesus. This really shows us an image of what is to come with the Messiah. As God gave up his only son, Jesus Christ, for us, so Hannah gave up her only son to carry on her name and take care of her in her old age, and gave him to the temple to serve there for his whole life. God uses him greatly. If you want to continue the story there in 1 Samuel. But I want you to know that your first commitment has to be to God, even over your own children. And the best thing you can do for your children is to give your children's future over to God. That's not easy to do. But I guarantee you, He loves them more than we do. He can take care of them better than we can. He wants us to give our children over to Him. Now, I'm not saying you have to come in and give your child to the church and we're going to keep them forever. But I am saying their future needs to be laid in God's hands, not in yours. We need to give our children's future over to God. Sometimes we think, well, the best thing my children can have is they can be happy in life. Or the best thing my children can do is they can be successful in life. I want my children to have a better life than I do. I want my children to do this or that. The best thing your children can do is serve God in their life, and nothing else even comes close to that. And you as a parent have been given a responsibility to serve God faithfully. You cannot make the decision for them to serve God, but you can be the one to guide them. Be the one to stand and say, God is important. See, because they are watching your example. And you can say whatever you want, but until you walk it in your life, they're not listening. The most important thing you can do is walk out a relationship before God that is righteous and holy, and allow your children to see it. And I'll tell you something else they see. They see my mistakes. They understand that I'm not perfect. My kids will be the first one to tell you, I'm not perfect, I make mistakes. I was rushing to get to Lincoln the other day, and I'm not saying this is bragging, but I've never had a moving violation in my life. I've never had a speeding ticket, because I started paying my own insurance when I was 15, and I knew that if I got a ticket, I couldn't afford to drive anymore, and I'd have to park my car. So I tried to be very good, but as I was rushing, all of a sudden I looked up and there was a police officer on the side of the road right in front of me, and I looked down and I was going like 8 or 9 miles per hour over the speed limit. And I just thought, you know, if he pulls me over, I completely deserve it. If he gives me a ticket, I'm not even going to argue. I completely deserve it. The ticket wasn't what worried me. What worried me more was the fact that my children saw that example of me speeding. See, because it meant more to me that I was leading them in the wrong direction than whether I would be punished myself. And it made me think that I need to be a lot more careful of what I do before my kids, because they are watching me. Now, I don't know why. He didn't move, he didn't budge, he didn't flicker, he didn't do nothing. I deserved it. But as I've been teaching my daughter to drive, I realize that she doesn't just listen to what I'm saying when she's driving, she watches what I do while I'm driving. And I want you to know that that carries over to every part of your life. We're not perfect. We're never going to be perfect. I'm so far from perfect, I can't see it from here. But God wants me to live my life as well as I can before my children, so that they may see my good works and glorify my Father which is in heaven. So that's what I encourage you. Parents, mothers, you make such a huge difference in your children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. Don't give up on doing good. Don't give up and think you're not making a difference. When you walk your walk before God, it matters. We're going to take communion. Could somebody get the kids for us? We're going to take communion this morning. And I want to take communion And I want you to know that God has forgiven all your mistakes as a parent, grandparent, or great-grandparent. I need that forgiveness. I've made many mistakes in being a parent. But I want you to know the forgiveness of the cross covers all those mistakes. He covers all my mistakes that I've made as a parent. He covers all your mistakes. As we take communion this morning, I want you to know there is forgiveness. God isn't asking you to make up for what you did wrong in the past. God is just asking you to do the best you can in the present. He's just asking you, do the best you can right now. Let me forgive the past. Let me worry about the past. You just do the best you can right now. If you turn your children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren over to Him, He is faithful and just. And He can fix all of my mistakes. And He can raise great children despite myself. And He can lead them to a relationship with Him. And that's the most important thing I could hope for, is that my children would come to know Jesus Christ. Nothing else even comes close to mattering as much as that one thing. So as our ushers come, thank you, ushers.